Centre for Sustainability, and a senior lecturer in the Department of Building and Civil Engineering. And I also lead the Build 360 research group in ATU, which focuses on the circular economy in the built environment. I'd like to thank the Innovation Value Institute, the Mayo University today for the invitation to moderate this webinar today, which will focus on circularity in the construction sector. As you can see from the screen, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers who will each give a short presentation on the work they're involved in, leaving plenty of time for discussion at the end. So to fully utilize the discussion piece at the end, I would encourage everybody as we're going through the presentations to post their questions in the Q&A, and we'll come back to those at the end and field them with the speakers. So first up, I'm delighted to introduce Thomas Rom, an architect and civil engineer who is passionate about climate repair. His architectural practice involves research, planning and construction with a focus on the environmental impact. As an expert in circular construction, Thomas is working on urban development on large-scale construction sites, designing urban mining concepts. He's a founder member of the cooperative Baukaruschel, hopefully I pronounced that okay, Thomas, a network of socioeconomic companies for recycling-oriented demolition. And he also teaches ecology for architects at the Academy of Fine Arts, Vienna, at the Institute for Art and Architecture. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sharing my screen. Welcome to sunny Vienna. I have 10 minutes to present 15 years of work, and I try to bring it over in 10 minutes. So yes, I'm an architect, I'm a trained architect, but I'm also a consultant to the ministry, and I'm trying to launch public procurement and circularity terms. And we are part of the realization of the Austrian strategy for circularity. And as you can see here in this paper, Austria is quite in the middle field of all the European 27 with a 12% of circular material use rate, quite on the average. Finland, for example, is half of it, and the Netherlands almost double. But what's the background of this circular material use rate? Can it be 100%? And the answer is clearly no, because we are needing, in terms of resource, 3 times more than we ever could possibly lead in a closed circle. So in Austria, and this is quite similar all over Europe, we need 3 times more resources than we have as possible secondary waste or secondary resources. And in both cases, it's up between 40, 50, and 70% even the construction sector, which is in need of this enormous amount of resources. So in Austria, more than half of all resources needed are mineral resources, and the other parts are metals and of course also biomass and energy. But on the other hand, on the waste sector, it's quite similar. We have 17%, this is in our case in Austria, 10 million tons of construction demolition waste, which should not confuse with circularity aspects. Because on the other hand, you see more than 55% is excavation materials, 3 times more than construction waste materials. So we have to focus also on excavation materials as waste and as a possible secondary resource. And this is what my short input is all about. So on the first hand, we need less. So less is more means in our time, less is more durable. We have to be concerned of the robustness of our plannings and our architecture and urban infrastructures. And second, we need renewable resources. And this is not only each and every building material has to be or has to become renewable. This is a very important issue. And then last but not least, of course, we need to have closed loops. And let me give you an example. I will distribute this publication afterwards, after this webinar, we started a contribution, and the manual of recycling with that graphic is done by my office to refer to the hierarchy of waste. So first of all, we have to reduce the mass flows in terms of urban approaches, urban design approaches. Reducing mass flows, I will explain it later, it means also to have an idea what urban development and urban strategies in urban development areas could mean for a mass flow. And then secondly, we have to build up a reuse system of building components. This is what Baukarussell is all about. And second, last but not least, of course, we have to also implement recycling strategies in these mass flows to generate secondary materials. And what we have published here in this manual of recycling is our idea in the Seestadt Aspern, one of the biggest urban development areas in all over Europe. And for the first 3,000 housing units, we had a strategy where we used the excavation material of the little lake, which you see on the left, and all the excavation of the first 3,000 housing units to make concrete out of it. So this gravel and sand was used entirely for concrete. And the effect was that we could handle over 60% of the mass flow on site just by recycling these excavation materials and washing it and sieving it and crushing it, of course, and to make it an aggregate for a mobile concrete unit, the biggest one in Austria, beside all these tunnels and infrastructures, but the biggest one in civil engineering in Austria for, as I said, the first 3,000 of 20,000 housing units built in the Seestadt Aspern. So this is almost 10 years ago, and all the concrete was produced on site, which was necessary. I mean, each and every concrete. There was not only one coming up from downtown. But also we learned in this project that we can handle other materials which are not building materials for landscape design purposes. So we started to develop the idea of a circular soil also, because very often we build on non-polluted soils, and when we discover or when we go on with urban development areas. And in that case, that means sand and silt as a non-building material. So I'm talking about the upper layer here, the upper meter, almost 2 meter and a half, and underneath that layer of silt, we have this excellent building materials in Vienna, close to the Danube. Yeah? And with that experience, we founded the idea of circular soil, which is now applied all over the city to preserve a valuable soil and use it and reuse it in recultivation purposes and not to deposit in the landfill. So ever since, and this is now almost 10 years, we have increased our efforts in sustainable concrete. And this is our latest research together with Strabag and Holcim and all these global players even. And you see the companies which we have gathered in the last 5 years in concrete research is immense. And also the city of Vienna is participating. How can we get concrete to become a sustainable building material? Because concrete is 10 times more common in global building materials than timber, for example. So, and our strategy was to replace cement with fillers based on limestone and limestone dusts, but also to use fillers which can compensate CO2, like, for example, technical carbon. And this is green technical carbon, which is the result from so-called backward power plants, where you use biomass to produce energy and of course power and heat on one hand, and to produce biochar on the other as a byproduct, not a waste product, but a byproduct. So we're adding this technical carbon in this filler and cement-reduced concrete, and you can reduce 80% of the CO2 impact of concrete by doing this. And this is the background from our presentation in November. And you see this charge for ordinary wall recipes and ceiling recipes for concrete, and we can do that right now. We don't have to wait for another research, but we can apply this in common practice in the next few years even. And as you can see, even the technical carbon in the concrete recipe is performing quite well, and you can apply this immediately in your building practice. And just to enforce, well, the disadvantage is that you have to handle this with care and with curing and caring when temperature are getting lower in winter times, and therefore Doka as a global player and formwork production has developed a heatable formwork which can be applied in winter to support these recipes, which are CO2 reduced. We published that under the name RCC, Reduced Carbon Concrete. Yeah, just a few images about these experiments we did in May last year, and technical carbon is dyeing the concrete into black concrete, which is perfect for architects, by the way. So let me finish with a short remark on our urban mining projects. Mark mentioned it. We are quite strong in that case in Austria with the crushing and sieving and recycling of concrete in that case. But in this special site for 700 housing units, we for the first time developed the idea of social urban mining, which is one step further, which is going in the direction of reuse. In that case, it was a Coca-Cola facility, and it had these insulation panels on top of 30,000 square meters. And this was the moment when we founded Baukarussell to recover these insulation panels and to use it for the insulation of the garage of these 700 housing units. This was the birth moment in 2016 of Baukarussell, was our first project. And ever since we really developed forward, and last year we founded out a cooperative for social urban mining in Vienna and all Austria. So the idea is to collect reusable objects in the demolition process or pre-demolition process in exchange for a dismantling work done by social enterprises. And this is supported also by the sorting of resources like copper and aluminium, which can be sorted by hand by social enterprises. And this is creating an enormous additional value which would not exist in the conventional, in the usual approach of a demolition process. And that's it. This is a short impression of our work, and I'm eager to have your questions and your comments.
Thanks, Thomas. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting. I love the social aspect of the urban mining. I think what we'll do is we'll come back to questions. I know I was jotting a few down myself there at the end, and we'll move through the speakers first. So thanks. That was fantastic. Great start. So next up, we have Colette van Jaarsveld. With over 24 years of experience as an interior architect, Colette is an innovator in sustainable design, construction, and component manufacturer. Her influence spans South Africa, Ireland, and the Middle East, where she's garnered awards for her work with the interior built environment, working with clients such as Aviva, Sony, Emaar, and Marriott. Colette's passion for sustainability has led her to early involvement in the development and distribution of sustainable materials in interior construction, notably supplying over 300 meters of recycled vanities within the King Abdullah Sports Stadium in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Arcology System, Colette's latest venture, revolutionizes interior construction with its adaptable kit of parts, hardware, sensors, and generative AI technology. This innovative approach not only creates modular flexible spaces that adapt to usage patterns, but also unlocks circular economy value from the beginning of the value chain. Over to you, Colette.
That's great. Can you see? Thank you for that, Mark. Can you see my slides?
You can see them, yeah, if you just put them on full screen. Yeah, that's it now. Perfect.
There we go. So I'm Colette and from Arcology System. And as the name suggests, arcology is architecture and ecology. So from consultancy, we've moved into manufacturing, which is quite exciting with Arcology System in 2019. So with post the pandemic, we focus primarily on interior spaces, and with a lot of commercial space, there's a problem that much of the space is empty and underutilized. And we're struggling with spaces that don't really meet the needs of tenants because tenants are looking for flexibility and adaptability. And we speak a lot in our industry about DFMA and modular offsite construction. And the way I explain to people is that's great. We're all moving in the right direction, but we're looking at the fabrication of new buildings and new boxes and timber construction, etc. And what we're forgetting is that 80% of the buildings to take us to net zero in 2050 already exist. And it's the inside of those buildings that really need a lot of work. So I refer to a report that was done by Arup and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in March of 2020. And what this report primarily focused on was unlocking of circular economy within real estate models. And what was quite fascinating about this particular report was the need for flexible spaces, the need for assets to be adaptable, the ability to look at components and so that they can be relocatable. That would be either buildings that could move or components within buildings that could move between buildings, maintaining that residual value, and also looking up and down the value and supply chain in terms of performance procurement. The problem we have is that the way we construct at the moment, primarily in fit outs, is it's fixed. And I explain to people the way we build is like soup. We're mushing everything together and then expecting buildings to be material banks and to be able to separate out those materials and gain value from it. But the way we need to build is more like sushi. So introducing Arcology System. And what we've developed, Arcology System, is actually an adaptable kit of parts hardware system, much like Meccano. And again, we take a nod to everyone's calling sensors and IoT the God save of everything and sticking sensors everywhere. But what you're doing is you're moving people around the problem rather than looking at the problem itself. So we've integrated the new construction system, the kit of parts, with environmental and occupancy sensors and generative AI. So what that means is we're able to have modular adaptable spaces that are actually adaptable according to the usage patterns of the people using them. And when you think that the average interior space is adapted every 5 to 7 years, this means we can keep materials in flow at their highest value possible. So if we look at fixed conventional construction, we have the materials and the value of the materials. We have the labor and the multiple subcontractors involved, the embodied carbon involved, the waste, the risk. And we end up taking all of that, putting it back in a skip. We've dilapidations and we've got reinstatement clauses on fit out. And we start all over again. Using a circular driven approach on fit out, you have the reduced materials, you have a semi-skilled single team of labor, reduced embodied carbon, and you're able to cycle that up to 3 times or even more with relocatable components, adaptable assets, and flexible spaces. You also influence the dilapidations and the reinstatement clauses because there is value there and you're not having to reinstate all the fixed components that you had in the beginning because everything is modular and adaptable. So we've retained the material and the asset value, and we're able to reskin, we're able to move from building to building, we're able to upgrade, And the material value is able to be traded. And we've a partner in this field, which is actually in Paris, Circularity, which can future trade the value of those materials. Joining us in making this shift happen, and our first initial pilot project, is the High Performance Building Alliance project down in Wexford in Ireland. It is a designated UN Centre of Excellence, one of 9 centres of excellence around the world. And it is promoting the agenda of circularity and performance and nearly net zero buildings. The High Performance Building Alliance was founded in 2019 and became a Centre of Excellence in 2021. It brings together the players that you see listed below: Wexford County Council, Enterprise Ireland, Irish Green Building Council, etc. And we also collaborate with Georgian Southern University, etc., in terms of bringing circularity to the built environment. So the first pilot project with our ecology system, I'm going to flick through it quickly, is a 500 square meter innovation campus center, which is promoting SMEs and businesses and education around the circularity in this space. So if we look at the overview of the space in terms of a typical co-working facility and a training facility, the way the system works is we install the smart grid at ceiling level, which incorporates all your fixed parts in terms of your services, your sensor components, your electrical components, magnetic lighting. But these grids also take all the wall components and interchangeable door components. So this allows us to create a space that is fully flexible, fully dismantleable, and the full kit of parts can be relocated and reconfigured in another building if required. So your typical fit-out value is retained. I'm just going to go through this quite quickly and ask me to go back if you need to look at everything else. And all the components are locally sourced and able to be reused and relocated. So just a bit on our ecology system, and eager to speak to those wanting to join us in making the shift happen. We're a Climb and Kick alumni company, and we are a group of companies that have come together to make this particular technology happen. So you can see us listed, the companies listed below. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colette. That was great. I love the pilot down in Wexford. It looks fantastic. We'd be interested to sort of follow up on that, but there's a couple of questions bubbling there in my head about that, so we'll come back to that later on.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Colette. That was great. So moving swiftly on, I'd like to introduce Helen Glingvad Christensen. So Helen, for the first couple of years after her education, she worked with housing planning and architecture of buildings and farms and planning of those in the landscape. After that, she worked for a couple of years in housing, but for the last 16 years, she's worked for the city of Gladsaxe in Denmark. She's done numerous projects with learning facilities and future learning facilities. And for the last 14 years, she's had a specific focus on sustainable development and architecture, from resources to low emissions buildings to environmental certification, focusing on recycling, upcycling, and using our resources in the best way. So there's a lot of barriers working in this field. So her approach to sustainable architecture is to look at construction activities in a holistic way, with the recognition that CO2 is not always the full answer. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. Colette, would you stop sharing the screen once again?
You can share there now, Helen.
Now I should be able to share, yes. Does it, oh, it should have shifted. There we go.
That's it now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can you see the full screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But thank you very much for inviting me to speak at your webinar. I'm architect and project leader in the city of Gladsaxe and primarily working with these kindergartens. What I'm gonna tell you about is this project Sven, or the Swan. It's a new kindergarten. It opened for a little more than a year ago, and is one of our pilot projects where we have tried to recycle materials from a school which was in the site before. And this is how it looked when it was just finished. And you can here see a lot of the different materials from the school. But see. We have had within, specifically in the last 7 years, had a focus on how to, I don't know if you can say sustainable, but at least sustainable development in the construction in the city of Gladsaxe. And we have different ways to try to reach the goals. And we have a strategy. It actually came as a further working on how to use FN UN goals. And the city of Gladsaxe took out different of these goals in their strategy. It's not only about building and construction, it's also about social values and a lot of other things. So like the whole thing in the municipality. And then we have the first project I participated in. We were actually doing it as a pilot project to try to reduce critical chemistry in or substances in our building materials. So we did a pilot project of the Nordic eco-labeling. And after that, the politicians decided that we were gonna use this Nordic eco-label for all our new kindergartens in Gladsaxe. And we're building 10 new kindergartens altogether in a period of around 10 years. And the Swan is like the 5th of them. On top of that, we also put on other strategies. We have a strategy for a green transition, and where we have to reduce the CO2 or the carbon emissions within the next years. So all that is kind of put into our development of how we construct. The kindergarten is just part of all the construction in the municipality. We have schools, we have elder centers and so on, but we actually use the kindergartens as a lot of, or to try out both the eco-labeling, but also some of the circulation, because it's a good size of a project. We have a kindergarten, the project is run for like 3 years, and then you from the beginning to have the house, and we can take advantage of the things we had tried in one project to bring the good things into the next project. The Swan or Sven is, as I told, kind of, or is two projects into the same project. We have here in the first black and white photo, it's the old school. It was built back, or the first part was built back in 1921. Some of that was torn down, but the big main building, which you see as the front out to the road, was finished in 1940. And then after that, you can't see that on the old picture, but they tore down all the kind of the buildings in the back and put up some new buildings in the 60s. And but we had the big main building and some buildings from the 60s which we had to use to harvest materials from to the new kindergarten. The old school was altogether 8,469 square meters. So we had kind of a lot of building material in the school to bring into the new kindergarten. The kindergarten is 1,468 square meters. So of course we took down the square meters for this coming project. The whole project started out with trying to look at the resources in the old buildings and how we could use them. It was actually 2 projects in one. We had to kind of figure out what the kindergarten should look like, and on top of that we had the whole demolition project for the school, where we should recognize or find out what materials we should use. So while we were doing the tender for the demolition, we were doing the project for the kindergarten to figure out what materials we actually had and what materials we could use in the kindergarten. And here we have some of the materials we have recycled and harvested from the old school. So we could have used a lot more different materials, but this is all we also did more than I have put in this slide. But we have some of the big amounts or things we have. So we have some of the steel panels. We have different kind of steel panels in the schools, and we have reused those. It was not so easy because the fixtures of how they were they were fixed on the old building was actually kind of hard to take them down. We have different kind of chemicals in these steel panels that's not allowed in actually the eco label, but instead of like just putting them to waste, we kind of did an analysis to see if when you wash them off, if you had chemicals to like the surrounding environment, and it did not. So we decided that we could use those together with the Nordic Eco label. Then as more like a pilot project, we took down whole concrete columns. It's kind of hard to handle. We have used those. It was also like the DTU, the Technical University, helped us with kind of figuring out if they could be used for construction again. They are actually, it ended out, we are using them as landscape elements. But to begin with, we had other ideas for those. Then we have pretty easy, which you should use that every place. You have the cobblestones. And then we have lighting fixtures. The lighting fixtures we have used for more than half the kindergarten. These are refitted lighting fixtures. They're not from the school. They're from other buildings around in the city of Gladsaxe. Then we have all the roof tile. We took the roof tile down from the roof, packed them on the roof, and took them right to, we had a storage place, and then we were put in the kindergarten on the facades on the roof. We have a lot of concrete from both the old building and from the 60s buildings we had in the school, and we actually used the concrete as aggregate, as a landfill, and we had around 6,000 tons of concrete, and actually it stayed on site. Actually, all the materials stayed on site because we had an old soccer field to store the materials. So that was one of my important things to work on, that we shouldn't use any CO2 to drive all these materials around. But the concrete is used as landfill and as aggregate for the new concrete in the kindergarten. Then we have all the bricks. The old school has clatter, and I don't know really washed facades, but we didn't actually know what colors they were before we took it down. So it was kind of exciting to see what kind of bricks we actually had for the new building. And then we had a lot of wooden trusses from the old school, and we have refitted those, but that was kind of a hard exercise to do. We took them down in whole pieces, and they were put in storage, and now they are kind of reinforced and put up together again. So we had a lot of discussions on in the project while we were doing that, and how are we gonna actually qualify these different materials to see if they're good enough for the project. Are they clean enough? How can we take them down without destroying the quality of the materials? So it has been a lot of hands-on in this project. And we have decided things while we were tearing things down and put them into the project. So it's I've been following the project all the way from the very beginning to we had the house finished. Here we have a few pictures. This is from their gym, and this is from the outside. There you see the wooden trusses, and it's kind of a climate zone. It's not heated, but you arrive here and you to this dry area, so get out the rain, and then you kind of enter the building from here. And this is from the inside of this glass climate zone, where you can see we have used like the bricks and the roof tile and the facade, and the bricks as also as flooring, and this is actually also reused some of this furniture. I did design that for the old kindergarten, this one, so they took that further on. We have some of the old lamps from the school here. And then a lot of the interior is new, but here is focused on what kind of materials we put into the building, and on these kind of metal wall panels. They are eco-jazz. It's a cradle to cradle product. We have linoleum with acoustic underneath for all the tables. We have also linoleum on the floors with this cocoa shell that have lower emission of CO2, and so on. And we try to put in different kind of interiors, so we lower the emission of a different chemistry inside as well. So that was, and here you have a picture from the outside where we have the roof tiles. But we have there's a lot of other things in the building where we try to recycle and reuse materials, and to try it all out.
Hey, Helen, thanks very much. That was really, really lovely project, really interesting. And the focus on the toxicity of materials sometimes is forgotten. So it's great to sort of see that focus, especially when you're building schools, kindergartens and things for kids. A lot of really interesting ideas there that we'll come back to in the discussion. So thanks very much. That was great. So nearly there now. Our next speaker is Giovanni Impoco. Giovanni is a qualified management engineer who has worked in resource efficiency, circular economy, BIM, open innovation and research. He's the circularity lead at the Irish Green Building Council and is working on the circular economy roadmap for the construction and the built environment. Prior to joining the IGBC, he worked in the construction sector, in the research environment, and in a venture capital. He was also a committee member of the SEN standards process for industrial symbiosis. Over to you, Giovanni.
Thanks, Mark. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Hi, everyone. So as Mark said, I'm Giovanni Impoco, representing IGBC, and I'm talking about Circular Build today. So, second, okay. So Circular Build is a EPA-funded project led by GBC and myself, and also in partnership with ATU, Atlantic Technical University, University of Galway, and Technical University of Dublin. And it's the three main pillars of this project are the roadmap, as Mark has already said, but also the application and toolkits, and also the educational hub. So the roadmap itself will be delivered in 18 months and right after the summer 2024. And as you can see, we are here in the process. I would like to share with you three main ideas at the beginning. You will see those repeated throughout my presentation. So the first concept is the waste hierarchy, which is linked to the circular building areas. As you can see, it's pretty important to talk about the first steps of the waste hierarchy, such as the prevention, which can be achieved through circular business models, and preparing for reuse, the second step, which can be achieved through circular design processes and procurement as well. A lot of work has already been done in Ireland regarding retrofitting, construction demolition waste. For instance, the job done and the work done by construction sector committee group, who has delivered for DEC the guidance for the circular economy in the Irish construction sector, but also EPA work done on Article 27, such as the byproduct, or the Article 28 and the waste criteria, and a lot of other projects. But almost nothing has been done in prevention and preparing for use. And we need to take those in consideration for deliver a full circular economy roadmap to Ireland. The second idea, it's this concept of switching from a value capture to value creation. The value creation is quite important in a more innovative circular economy approach, and this is where circular build, such as the project, comes in. But I will come back to this concept later. Also, we need to take in consideration the terminology. For instance, the term waste sometimes unconsciously give us the sense of something which we would like to discard. On the other way around, if we start utilizing different terminologies such as underutilized resources, it will stimulate in us some more circular approach. So before we started with Circular Build, the workshop journey early November in Dublin. Then we were in Cork in late November. We did another workshop in Limerick in late January, and also the middle of February again in Dublin. We will be learning a lot from different international experts and speakers, such as some circular economy solutions are already been applied somewhere else, but could be potentially replicated in Ireland. We also learn a lot how quality of data and its availability is very important in Ireland, and also in the circular switch, as also Colette has already said. We also learn how supply risk is something which the whole supply chain should prevent. And also we learn a lot how acting early in the construction process will facilitate the delivery of circular economy. So let's come back to the first slide, the first concept. So we are not going, in the project, we were not talking about recycling and recovery, as already was covered by different entities. So in Ireland, everybody knows how the construction demolition waste is impacting, for instance, that 50% of the total waste by weight is generated by construction demolition waste, or how many vacant properties we have in Ireland. But as I said, circular economy is much more than that. So for a full circular economy roadmap, we need to consider also prevention and preparing for use. But let's see what also we should also consider. Design for modularity or design for deconstruction. Those design methodologies have different, allows different benefits, like an extended life of the building itself, an easy and lower maintenance of the building, but also the speed, which could be up to 70% faster than traditional methods. We also should consider product as a service. Here we have a couple of examples, elevator as a service or lighting as a service. If we focus on the left side, like the lighting as a service, here we have two actors, Philips, who is providing this lighting as a service, such as they are the owner of the product, the lighting product. They can reuse, they can take it back, they can refurbish, they can sell it again. On the other way around, you have the Amsterdam airport, which pays less upfront cost. And also they get replacement and more upgrades in the time. We should also consider the extended producer responsibility, which is an environmental policy approach already being used in Ireland in different sectors, like in the packaging, in the tire waste management, and also in WEEE and batteries. The aim of this extended producer responsibility is incentivizing the producer to design more circular. One of the main characteristics is the waste management fee is shifted from, and the responsibility are shifted from the local authority to the producer itself. That's why they need to design more circular. Here you have more or less an overview how the policy instruments, different policy instruments. Just let's focus on the last one, back to market, which is the take back scheme. At the end of the life of the product, the producer has to take it back. So if they design more circular, will be an advantage for them, as well as you can see at the beginning, an environmental fee. They can also pay an environmental fee, which is going to be less if they produce more circular as well. So here a kind of overview of the circular areas and the application and at which level they are applied. For instance, prevention is mostly at the financial level. As you can see, we have the product as a service, which is a leasing model, against a selling model represented by the standard producer responsibility. Also, they are applied at value chain level, as both of them, for instance, are doing the take back scheme. So they are also including different other actors. And if we think about the preparing for use, it's mostly at the design and procurement level. But when I'm talking about design, you should also consider design for disassembly and modularity, as already mentioned, but also BIM, material passport, and traceability tools. We need a circular economy roadmap, and everybody here in Ireland is aware about CO2 emissions and its targets, but we should also consider other indicators for measuring circularity in projects, as also the speakers today highlighted. So, for instance, here we have an overview of different indicators which go beyond the only environmental value indicators. For instance, we have the economic value and the social value, which they are value indicators, but also other rates, for instance, for usability, for refurbishment or remanufacturing, which are very important for measuring circularity in our projects. But why I'm talking about this? Because I would like to remind you that those indicators will allow to switch from the value capture model, which is the process of retaining some percentage of the value provided in every transaction, to a value creation model. The value capture is basically the approach Ireland has at the moment, which is considering recycling as the main driver for circularity. But we need the value creation, such as turning resources into something more valuable with work, which includes the production of tangible goods, but also service. Just think about product as a service. As you can see here, usually the business as usual in Ireland is very provocative image, but Usually all the construction in Ireland, most of the construction in Ireland goes into demolition, which then leads to the recycling processes. But recycling doesn't prevent waste from being generated at the first instance. It also destroys most of the labor invested in product design and also development in the process. So preventing waste at the first instance makes much more economic sense for everyone. Here are some examples of value creation, like the leasing model sometimes is also more cost effective than the normal one. We can also see like the sharing economy here, just highlighting an app which allows to optimize those spaces, also providing some decision tools, decision-making support, for instance, for optimizing operative costs like lighting and lights bills. Also here, a digital case in Estonia. They digitalize everything in the build environment over there, from the public and the private sources. It allows them to improve production in construction by 3%. And also if you just simulate the construction of there, you can see how much material is in the area and could be reused. 49 nations have already a circular economy roadmap, and Ireland will join soon. Circular roadmaps are very important because they help to shape somewhere else in Europe some guidance and also targets. And here I'll give you some examples. Netherlands, they are boosting circular economy of there through three main pillars: market development, measuring, and policy. Market development is quite important there because they are providing support for innovative products and services, and also they are creating incentives for R&D and pilot projects. They also use a common language for measuring and circularity in those projects. In France, they are using two pillars, measuring and policy. They are measuring, for instance, the secondary raw material inputs in every construction, and they're also using a polluter pay schemes, which is basically the standard producer responsibility. In Italy, they're also using measuring. For instance, the green public procurement of there is mandatory, and at least they need to use 50% of recycled content in the total materials. They also use some, they also need to use recycled content, which has to have EPDs or some certification like Remade in Italy. They also launched in 2017 the BIM degree. So such as all the public tenders above 15 million euros must have BIM methodologies. So at the end, circular economy and also different policies like the EU taxonomy, different European policy which will be applied in the Irish context will shape the construction sector and its business. For instance, coming from this 2024, if you don't comply with those regulations, many of those construction company and suppliers will not participate to tenders, which means then in a cascade way, less construction contracts, less material sales, such as less revenue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Giovanni. Some really good examples there of some international best practice, and the Irish Green Building Council have been and are continue to do some fantastic work, not just in the circular economy, but also in the whole area of carbon, biodiversity, and lots of different things. So I'd encourage everyone here today to log on to the website. There's lots of events and trainings and CPD and research projects there. So thanks a million, Giovanni. So finally, I just want to hand over to Claudia, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Innovation Value Institute in Maynooth, just to give a brief outline of the related EPA project. So over to you, Claudia.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Let me just turn on the video. Yep, okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. And as Mark said, my name is Claudia Ressing. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Innovation Value Institute at Maynooth University. So I just like to briefly describe to you one of our projects that we are working at the moment. So the project's called Vision, and which is funded by Environment Protection Agency, EPA, and it focuses on the identification of opportunities to minimize the use of virgin materials used in the construction sector in Ireland, as we have been discussing in this webinar. So the construction sector is a key area that has a significant impact on the environment because it consumes around 40% of raw materials. So in addition to that, the construction and demolition projects are responsible for about a third of the total waste generated in the European Union. So therefore, there is a lot of pressure in the sector to shift to a more sustainable approach. So, and also this industry is critical to meeting Ireland's climate policy commitments, make it even more crucial that prevention and reuse are built into construction activities. So that's why in the Vision project, we concentrate on incorporating the extraction of virgin materials. So having this in mind, the project will design and show the feasibility of circular business models together with recommendations for policies and standards by reviewing and evaluating different approaches that are gaining traction internationally. So it's based on an industry academic policy-making collaboration. That's why it is important to have webinars like this one so we can bring together a diverse and knowledgeable group of professionals who can share their valuable insights and perspectives on circularity in the construction sector. The project also brings together a multidisciplinary team from the Business School, the Innovation Valley Institute, and the Department of Computer Science from Maynooth University. And our main goal is to identify best practice options that can be applied with the construction sector in Ireland. So thank you very much, Mark. Back to you. So let me just stop sharing.
Thanks, Claudia. So a really interesting project. I'm not sure if the participants can post. I don't think the Q&A and chat is enabled for questions. So I don't know if you want to have a look at that to see can people post the participants. But in the meantime, I can pose a couple of questions to the group and I'll sort of pick out people. Like from all the presentations, one thing that struck me was, the collaboration is key across the value chain and the supply chain. So I wonder, Tomas, if you want to jump in there, the importance of collaboration and the importance of early engagement in your experience.
True. I want to emphasize that the major work should be done even on the level of urbanistic design. As I mentioned, when you are able to define some mass flow goals for city development areas, it's a crucial issue for the investor to find out how the strategy will work and to go into details. But the first layer is the urbanistic design, the master plan area. And then secondly, all our initiatives are ending up in gathering the investors and the development and the developers for a common, for a procurement of special strategies, like, for example, this mobile concrete unit, which turned out to be less expensive than the usual way they do it with transportation of concrete from a stationary facility. And the same is the case with mobile crushing and sieving units to hold these resources on place, like Helen pointed out with her project. But to scale this up to a major to a major strategy, you have to find a strategy which fits for them all. So the contractors should be able to give some input also in the process of tendering, to do it his way or her way. And this is a question finally of collaboration, like you said. So from the administrative area of city planning down to the investment area, where the investors should think how to realize this in the tendering process, coming to the final area of design and real construction world with the construction business. So only the cooperation of all these areas are able to turn out to a strategy which can really be named circular.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. And like, I suppose that's key, is to allow and allocate that time at an early stage, because the construction sector is such a fast-moving, competitive environment. Sometimes the time isn't given. And I'm wondering, Kailash, obviously for the service that you're offering, it's key as well. Like often, you know, the fixtures and fittings and, you know, the layer with the 5 to 7 year life is often not even thought about. And it's sort of mightn't be an end of life. It might be a sort of, we just want to change the interior, we want to change the style. So it can be quite, you know, flippant, and to get rid of all of these resources. So, you know, from your perspective, would you like to elaborate on the aspect of collaboration?
Mark, thanks. I think it all boils down to the business model, and it also the value. There's a lot to be said about the shared value. And I often say to people, in terms of what we've done and what we've figured out, is unlocking that circular economy value from the way that a space is financed, the way that it is procured, the way that it is designed, procured, built, managed, and the end of life. And when you look at that supply and that value chain, what's really important is like Thomas was also referring to, was that, you know, at the very beginning, from the, you know, and also Giovanni had mentioned product as a service. How is this financed? How is this procured, you know, in terms of regulation? How is this designed? And when you start bringing people together around that unlocking, that's when you start getting exciting things happening. And that's when it starts working. Because more often than not, we're very isolated in what we're doing, and it's only very siloed in one section of that supply chain. I'd mentioned, say, the sensors, or, you know, that type of thing where, you know, we can try and save money here by optimizing meeting room usage or whatever the case is. It doesn't do anything up the supply chain, and it doesn't do very much lower down in the supply chain. And you certainly is not influencing how that space is built or how that space is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years from now. Collaboration has to be, it's paramount. It's incredibly important. It's the only way it can work.
Yeah, thanks, Kailash. And Helen, and just to follow on from that, like it's pretty obvious when you're doing your school's development, like you had these existing buildings, and then you had this new building, and you sort of said, oh, well, we were looking at the resource, the existing buildings as a resource to transfer into the new building as if it's an everyday occurrence. That doesn't really happen all the time. So I'm just wondering, like, did you utilize, and Colette just mentioned it there, like the procurement and the tendering and the design specification, did you utilize those levers to ensure that the existing buildings were seen as a resource to sort of feed into the new building?
Yeah, we were, that was why we actually did the two projects kind of in a parallel working process, because it was very important for us to have all of the materials in the tender for the new project. It was a total contractor who built the new kindergarten, and that was because we actually wanted to have a pretty far project before we had the tender, so we could incorporate all the materials from the school. So therefore, we had like lists of different materials, and we said, well, we do have 70,000 bricks, and you're going to use them all. If you don't use them, we will fee you. So if they didn't use it for the project, if the total contractor would say, well, it's cheaper for us to bring in new bricks, then they should pay us money. And we were kind of having a rating or a price list, for example, the bricks. So we kind of knew how many bricks we were supposed to use, and then we were lowering as, yeah, we kind of came over that amount, so we shouldn't. So it was realistic. And on top of that, we actually didn't start out with all the concrete as aggregate because we didn't know what we actually had. But that was very important for me that we should use all this concrete on site. So therefore, we used as much. We divided the concrete in 3 different portions, so we could use some for actually landfill, but not only landfill, but making an entrepreneur, I don't know if you say dirt, but making it better. And then we did use it for aggregate, and then we did use it underneath pavement. So all the concrete from the school is actually used on site. So none of it has kind of gone. And also, like, for the bricks, we had like broken bricks and stuff like that, which was not used directly. We were also crushing those and use them as fill around. I don't know what it's called, like where you have surface water going down to different basins there. So we did put that all into the tender before, so we were sure to make sure they were going to use it. But of course, I have been working on it, and we had made decision on the way in the project to use as many. And then we did actually try to bring windows from the project into the next, but we did have some difficulties with the energy use.
Energy rating of the components,
yeah. So we couldn't, I mean, so therefore it's harder to kind of bring all materials further onto the building.
And that's a really good point, because I suppose, you know, across Europe and internationally, we're moving towards zero emissions buildings or zero energy buildings. And there can be a conflict sometimes with circularity principles, in that if you're trying to reuse old components who don't meet the performance standards going forward, there's a discussion to be had there, I think, which isn't really being discussed at the moment, but it's definitely something we need to discuss. That's great, Helen. Thanks very much. And Giovanni, just on the
and actually, I could add, especially chemistry has also been a problem in that case, because it's hard to find out when something is not polluted or when it's clean. What is the definition of that? We have used a lot of time to discuss that as well.
Yeah.
So that's another issue to when we have to recycle materials. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Helen. And just Giovanni, to put the same question to you, but maybe frame it a little bit differently. You've done sort of 4 workshops now with industry as part of the roadmap. Like, has collaboration come out as a cross-cutting team from the engagement across the different sectors?
So, Circular Build is still, still a high level. We need to harvest all those data collected through the workshops, but I think I have some valuable outputs already. I would say, like, in terms of collaboration, procurement in this sense could be a powerful tool, especially if we start a market research and discussion between the parties at the pre-tender stage. For instance, adding specification and selection of materials before signing off any contract. In case of, we had also one international speaker from Italy. She was explaining how in Italy the GPP is mandatory, and also how they create a supportive tool for allows to match supply and demand of secondary raw materials together with the technical specification, which are quite important and relevant. And also they were doing something even further. They were quantify all the recycled content, all the recycled content throughout different value chains and crossing them with the construction one, which I think was kind of great. In terms of also collaboration, Colette was mentioning something already before. Everyone in the value chain should start this switch to circular economy, starting from pension funds who are investing in properties, to banks, to also insurance company, because when you talk about product as a service, all the insurance, all the issues related to the take-back scheme come in. So they need to allow this new supply chain, let's say, to be real and to work.
Thanks, Giovanni. Yeah, and the issue of procurement, as Helen already mentioned, Tomas mentioned as well, and Colette, everyone has mentioned it. Like, it's good to see in Ireland the new climate action mandate, which is a national sort of directive from the government, has really put a focus on procurement now and pushing the green public procurement for the public sector. So it's out for consultation at the moment. It's well worth people to sort of engage with that and see what potentially the requirements are going to be, but they're quite specific. And also there's a requirement in there for the preparation of resource and waste management plans during the design and construction phase. So that helps with the collaborative piece. I suppose, like, a question that always pops up as one of the main challenges and barriers is the recertification of materials. So it's Helen was lucky, I suppose, no material left the site. But here, if a material leaves the site, it's classified as waste. Now, we have directives there to look at byproducts and end of waste criteria and so on. But I suppose, Tomas, let's go back to you. In your experience, especially with urban mining and so on, the reluctance, and understandable reluctance sometimes, of designers, structural engineers, and so on, to specify recycled materials or second life materials. Have you come across that as a challenge and a barrier?
You're absolutely right, Mark. This is a major issue. But on the other hand, this is one of the most important reasons why we do it on site without transportation, and we are using our own materials, not really confronting the issue of regulations in that West space of certification, which is absolutely necessary when you start to sell these materials. So this is, let's say, it's the best way to address a direct use on site, which is, by the way, also the more ecological way. But you cannot handle this with all these cases of different construction sites, inner city sites, and so on. So we need to have also other approaches, that's for sure. And we are trying with Baucarousel to build up an economy for reuse, but to be honest, it's below 10% of all the materials we can have in a closed loop, the reused materials. So we have to really focus on other issues, as I said, in terms of excavation, in terms of using, like, let's say, the structures, the primary structures, to keep them in use and to build on these primary structures and to make them fit for other users. So these are different strategies when you consider it as a whole. So you have at least 3, 4, 5, 6 different approaches and strategies to work in a real circular approach for building industry. It's not just one. And the question of certification of raw material, secondary material, is quite advanced, but not for reused materials. So this is another scale simply. Can you share your experience, Colette?
Yeah, Colette, I suppose, like, and it might be a slightly different angle, but the idea of designing for multiple lives would obviously resonate with what you're trying to do. So if you want to expand on that.
I'd have to agree with you, Thomas, is that it is, you see a lot of these, material sites and, popping up everywhere and saying, I've 200,000 bricks and, I'm, in London or whatever the case is, and circular demolition audits and all this type of thing. And nothing's really coming together. Everyone's trying to do these isolated activities. But, is somebody going to be building in Manchester using these 200,000 bricks? I doubt it. I just don't see the market being there right now. And I have to, while Thomas was speaking, I was questioning myself in terms of, what we are doing, particularly for the fit out environment and enabling that reuse. And it's giving that mechanism to enable that reuse from building to building, from material to material, to reskin, that we're not, you're reducing the amount of demolition because you're upgrading by reskinning rather than taking everything away and having to supply from scratch again. I think if I sort of nod towards the HPBA project, which is quite exciting, the way we've brought together, for instance, the joinery, the joiners, the builders, you're opening up different value chains for all of these suppliers where, a joinery company or reduced overheads and, lack of skilled expertise, you're opening up opportunities for these guys where they're looking at this and going, well, this is fantastic. There's a new line of revenue here for me in terms of XYZ material. But it comes back to that pulling everyone back together again. If you don't have the mechanism, if you don't have the product as a service, if you don't have the framework, it's very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, the value proposition, it's often said circular economy is a concept with very little economists involved in it. And, the sort of value proposition of that is really important as well. Helen, I'm just interested because from my perspective, sometimes I see a disconnect at a national level where there would be requirements there, to push or nudge or encourage or force an industry to become circular without necessarily doing the hard work on the other end to facilitate that, to have the infrastructure there, to have the certification of secondary materials. I'm just wondering what the situation like is in Denmark. Is it different or is it the same challenges? Because you took a municipality approach, which is, a sort of a holistic approach within your region.
Yeah, well, we do have the same kind of regulations because of problems, because as Thomas says, a lot of the materials are handled as waste if it leaves the site. It depends a little on if you, like with bricks and tile, if you take it down in the way of the material as it is. If you take down a tile, it's never going to be waste because it's still a building material. Then you can talk about it as a building material, and then you can use that on another side. But then on top of that, when it's not even waste and it's still a material, then we cannot, as a municipality, we cannot sell it, or we can only sell it on like the market level. So how are you going to do that? Instead of it's always best to use it in some of the other projects we do have in the city. But we are also working on in the region of Copenhagen. So how can we work together and kind of figure out where we have materials in other projects so we can kind of time them so that you can get the best use. I'm starting up another project now where we have some smaller buildings where it's also a kindergarten, but we do have to figure out what we can take out here. But in the same on the same time, we do really have a space problem here because there's not enough space. So I'm trying now to figure out if it's best to use them in the coming construction of this kindergarten, or if we should try to use them in some other projects that's coming up before. But it is a problem to what is waste and what is materials. So yeah, we do have, and on top of that, there's coming a new regulation on waste and how you have to handle demolition this summer. So we are kind of figuring what are we gonna do with that, and yeah, but it's I think and as Colette says, is you have all these different sites, so you're trying to gather all these materials, and a lot of them are never going to be used. And actually with this modular system, some of the best materials and some of those materials we really have to reuse is all those materials that has a specific size as bricks, because everybody can know how to put an old brick into a new project. So on your building, because you know the size of it, and you can almost all places you can add to the number you have already. If you have a kind of, yeah, a specific amount, and you can add on, and you can still have the project developed. So, and it's also a CO2, I don't know if you see a CO2 heavy product. So, and it's also almost clean of all kind of chemicals. So we really have to focus on those modular building or construction materials that we have, and which are durable and almost also beautiful when you reuse them.
Yeah, and I suppose taking that, creating an internal market at an urban scale goes back to what Tomas mentioned earlier on, so that a local authority within their remit or a municipality has an idea of how many buildings have to be done in a certain year, how many renovations has to happen, and with a little bit of planning and a little bit of time, surely there should be sort of a flow of materials going around those. And sometimes I think that, the solution is in front of us and we don't see it. If you look at conservation projects and protection of historic structures and stuff, where you have to reintegrate materials that represent the character and the structure of those buildings, there's actually a lot of embedded and inherent circularity there. And, there's a strong sort of professional competency around that here and in a lot of places, obviously. So that's sort of really important as well, that we don't have to create something new, that these skills and competencies actually exist. They're just framed in a different way. So thanks, Helen. That's great. Just Giovanni, and I know this wasn't a project that you were directly involved in, but just to highlight that the Irish Green Building Council are working on a project around the materials exchange with Rachel there. I wonder if you want to just talk for a minute about that, just to highlight it to the participants.
Yeah, just coming back, was to the problem. Yeah. As an external observer, I would say like EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, is taking care mostly about the environment. That's why maybe they are more strict than in other countries. Thinking about my past research and experience as a standardization committee member, in some countries like Denmark, there are the local authorities, as also you already mentioned, which are bridging between the industry and the government. So they can understand the problem of industry and then bridging with governmental authorities in order to address different needs, like, for instance, secondary raw materials, waste, or byproducts. That comes like from the old Kalundborg school. And also in UK, they did this with the NISP, National Industrial Symbiosis Program. There were some authorities were doing this bridge between how industries and also governmental authorities. But also, as you say, like CIMEX is our project, is mapping out secondary raw materials and is trying to create a secondary material market, which could be also another solution for Ireland in this sense.
Yeah, and like the two issues, well, the main issue at the moment is the recertification, but another very simple issue that if people want to put their material up on this digital exchange is that they're not describing the materials. So like if you don't have a proper description, it's very hard. It's like going into the shop and saying it's bread without describing, what sort of bread it is. Is it sliced? Is it a loaf? Is it brown? Is it white? So, at a very
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, at a very simplistic level, that's sort of important. Like we just have a couple of minutes left, but something that was mentioned by a couple of the speakers, which is really interesting to me and sometimes sort of frustrates me a little bit when we start talking about the circular economy, because people immediately jump into material flows. I know we'll demolish this and we'll circulate it and we'll do that, and that's good. But what about, as Tomas said at the very beginning, use less? And I'm sort of really interested in the role of municipalities, but also design teams. So municipalities and local authorities, to me, have a huge amount of influence because they're clients in the first instance, but they're also planning regulatory authorities. So they grant planning permissions so they can make things mandatory. So I'm wondering, Tomas, just to come back to that point about using less, your experience of that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the digital aspect of it. Uh, so we are trying to force with the strategy for for the ministry to use more primary structures and to have to make it an effort to bring them down by demolition. So the main focus at the moment for us is to emphasize the use of primary structures before you bring them down, and to look up with engineers, with civil engineers involved, how you can make them fit for reuse. Yeah. So primary structure in the existing environment, built environment, has to be emphasized as a caretaking problem. Yeah, so we have to focus on that first. And the secondary issue is then how can you improve these structures, and what do you learn for your planning of new structures? Yeah, so to not to invest an enormous amount of materials for the next generation, but to invest more intelligence in a primary structure which is built by now for a next generation use. So the second and third use of our buildings is a major issue in the planning of architecture and engineering structure, which has not been addressed yet in any kind of education. So we have also to face this cultural aspect of circularity in the planning process. And as you said already, it's not only about the material flows. It's also about having in mind what kind of uses will be necessary in future terms, yeah, or not necessary at all, yeah. So what an office building can offer as a primary structure for other users. Yeah, and it's less housing that we turn down, but a lot of cinemas after COVID. We had a lot of cineplexes coming down now, being bankrupt, and these are inner city structures we could be addressed with this kind of strategies. And I have noticed that question here in the Q&A addressing the issue of material passports. And these material passports should not be reduced to a BIM model of the planned object. It should also addresses the issues of soil, where you build on, or as a structure which should be replaced. So all these issues should be also addressed in the material passport. It's not about the planning also, but it's also by using an existing structure or the existing soil.
Thanks, Tomas. And like, I suppose it's how you frame the question, really. If you look at the existing infrastructure and its buildings and infrastructure, and you think of the material capital that's gone into it, but then think of the human capital, the amount of work that went in to create that infrastructure and building, and can we measure it so that the argument, it leans heavily towards retention and adaptive reuse rather than let's demolish it and let's move on. So I'm just conscious of time. We're just, is anyone else of the participants like to jump in for the last minute on anything that's a burning answer to anything? Because I don't want to go over time. Okay, I think everyone is happy enough. Look, at that was fantastic. We could stay here for another hour or two, I think, and chatting about the different things, but maybe we'll take up the conversation again. And just on the question of material passports, like there is a lot of work going on at European level about digital logbooks and how does that interact with material passports, and then building passports, and then they have the renovation passport. So there's lots of passport words in lots of different things. But Madaster do great work. Fantastic work, Pablo, there in Madaster. So maybe when the IVI are sending out the slides, what we might do is send out a couple of links as well to answer some of the questions. So I just like to thank all the speakers. It was fantastic. I just want to highlight the slide that's up there on your screen at the moment, to keep in touch with the IVI. And many thanks to them for hosting the webinar today. And click into their LinkedIn and follow them on X. I was going to say Twitter, but it has moved on to X. So I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks to everyone again, and hopefully you enjoyed the seminar. And if you want any follow-on, you can follow up with IVI. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.